The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Round 1 of the Summer Classic here in St. Louis. The Masters division was highlighted by 4 decisive games in favor of Grandmasters Durabaili, Sevian, Akobian, and King of the Spring Classic, Jeffrey Zhang. The 17-year-old capitalized on a miscalculation by Kazakh champ Jumabayev for the point. 2 full points were awarded in Group B, as Grandmaster Ali Marandi won a piece early, making quick work of Grandmaster Belos. In the final game to conclude, Grandmaster Dragoon finished a bishop up in a rook and pawn endgame against international master Sadua Kasova. Round 2 coverage starts now. With 35 grand on the line, 20 international chess professionals compete in St. Louis, as USChessChamps.com presents the first ever Summer Chess Classic.
Hello everyone, welcome to the St. Louis Chess Club studio and the 2018 Summer Chess Classic. I am Women Grandmaster Katerina Nemcova and I am here with International Master Eric Rosen.
That's right, and we have a very strong field taking place right now. We have 2 very strong groups of Grandmasters, and we don't see this type of tournament every day where it's a round-robin format with so many elite GMs. This is usually the type of tournament which takes place among super Grandmasters, but it's going to be some very exciting chess to look forward to.
And today we have the second round of the Summer Chess Classic, but let's look what happened yesterday. For the yesterday results of Group A, results 1.
Yeah, we had a ton of decisive results in Group A. 4 decisive games with Sam Sevian, Vasif Darabaili, Rosen Akobian, and Jeffrey Zhang, all getting off to a very nice start with winning their first round games.
And the group standings?
Group standings for round 2, or going into round 2, we see a very divided group here, with a lot of players getting off to a slow start. We have 4 players with 0 points: Daniel Friedman, Peter Prohaska, Rinat Jumabayev, and Alexander Ingic. I'm sure looking to hopefully come back strong in round 2.
Absolutely. And let's look at yesterday's results of Group B. There we had only 2 decisive rounds where Kamil Dragun won against Dinara Saduakasova and Vladimir Belos lost against JJ Ali Marandi. The other games were a draw. So when we go to the second round, we see the results that only Kamil Dragun and Ali Marandi are leading the pack.
That's right, and we should keep in mind that Marandi won based off a very careless blunder by Belos, so maybe it was some first round rust or first round nervousness that Belos felt. But sometimes when you get in the rhythm of the tournament, then there will be less blunders going forward.
Absolutely. So let's just ask for the graphics for standings for Group B. That's
right. And we should note to the viewers that you can see all the pairings, standings, and games on USChessChamps.com. In Group B, we have 2 leaders, Kamil Dragun and JJ Ali Marandi, leading the pack. Still a lot of chess to be played.
Absolutely. So the tournament format, we have 2 10-player round robins with a time control 90 minutes for 40 moves, plus 30 minutes for the remainder of their game, and with 30-second increment from move 1.
That's right, and we should also keep in mind there's a 30-move no-draw rule, which means players cannot accept a draw before move 30. This should lead to a lot of fighting and a lot of exciting chess.
Absolutely. So let's look at the schedule for this tournament.
That's right, we have games starting at 1 p.m. Central Time every day until the last day, where the round starts 2 hours earlier at 11 a.m. And if there is a tie in either group, there will be a playoff on Wednesday the 23rd at 5 p.m. I know we would be looking forward to that.
Absolutely, we are always excited about the playoffs. So let's see what's happening today, round 2 for Group A.
Right, we have the round 2 pairings, some exciting matchups with Benjamin Bach versus Rinat Jumabayev, Rosen Akobian against Jeffrey Zhang, Vasif Darabaili against Alexander Ingic, Peter Prohaska against Daniel Friedman, and Yaro Zherubuk against Sam Sevian.
The key matchup is absolutely clear. It's Varush Akobian against Jeffrey Zhang, 2 very strong Americans.
That's right, and they're both fresh off the U.S. Championship. We should keep in mind they actually played in the U.S. Championship with the same colors they have today, And I'm sure it's going to be a hard-fought game. The game is actually already underway, and we should go ahead and take a look. We see Jeffrey there sitting, Rosen perhaps walking around, maybe getting something to eat. Oh no, there he is, walking back to the board. And we have a position which was pretty sharp earlier, but it seems like the dust has settled, and it looks like the position might be simplifying relatively quickly to a draw. I mean, the rooks are about to get traded. It's bishops of the same color. Material is equal, so I don't think we'll need to spend too much time analyzing this game.
Yes, maybe we will get back to this game, but let's see what is the round 2 for Group B pairings.
That's right. In Group B for round 2, we have Dinara Saduqasova against JJ Alimirandi, Andrei Sukopin against Vladimir Belis, Alejandro Ramirez against Robert Akasarian, Sergei Matsenko against Josh Friedel, and Kamil Dragan against Tatev Abrahamian.
And the key matchup is Kamil Dragan against Tatev Abrahamian. We have the world champion under 16, European champion under 16, against the US Olympic team member Tatev Abrahamian, who was actually very close once to win the US Women's Championship.
That's right, and we should keep in mind that Kamil Dragan is the top-rated player in Group B, and Tatev is the lowest-rated player. So there's a pretty big rating differential in this match, given that Kamil Dragan is over 2550 FIDE. I believe Tatev is around 2350 FIDE. So we'll have to see how that game is progressing.
So let's see. I'm of course rooting for Tatev, who is my US team member. So let's see how is she doing. That's
right. We can see both players very intently focused on the board currently. The position looks very, very crazy. I mean, I have to say I don't like Black's position given just White's very harmonious setup. Queen on d4, knight on e3, rook's doubled on the f-file, and Black's overextended pawn on e4, it seems like more of a weakness than it is a strength.
Yes, it looks more comfortable for White. On the other hand, if we exchange the knights, we have same color bishops, we may trade some rooks. I mean, you also need some material to win a game. So, well, let's see what are the prizes that the players are fighting for.
That's right. There's a lot of money up for grabs. There's a very generous $22,000 with a $6,000 first place prize. That's a lot of money for 9 days of chess.
Absolutely. I think players are very happy to be competing for this money and also to be competing in such a nice place as St. Louis.
That's right. And we have also a very generous prize fund for Group B with $14,000 up for grabs, $4,000 for first place. And there's a lot of college students playing in this event, so I'm sure some of these prizes could fund a pretty nice summer vacation.
I agree, and I think college students are very relaxed now after finals, and that makes me think about the game Jaro Zerebuk is just playing. I mean, his opening, what do you think about that, Eric? I mean,
yeah, for those of you who are just joining us, we've had a very strange first few moves in the Jaro Zerebuk game against Samuel Sevian with a3 on move 1. When was the last time you've seen an opening like this, Katerina?
I mean, you can expect anything from Jaro or from similar players, but I don't remember seeing anything like that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's very bizarre. The logic behind this is Jaro maybe wanted to play a black opening in this game and is just maybe making a waiting move with a3. And what happened in the game after e5, Jaro played maybe another very strange move, c3. But actually what transpired is we had a reverse Caro-Kann after d5 and d4. And I mean, if you look at the position after move 2, this might just be a novel position.
Actually, now I remember my teammate when I used to play for the Czech team, she used the same variation at the European Team Championship against Zhukova, and it was very interesting because she wanted just to get Caro-Kann with White, and this is the best way actually to do that because a3 may be a valuable move in Caro-Kann.
That's the big question. Is a3 actually helping White in any way? If we go forward and see what happened in the game, I mean, it seems like the pawn is just sitting there doing nothing, and White just lost a tempo for no reason in the opening. I really like the way Sam proceeded in this position. He provoked White to play g3, and then he wasted no time going for a pretty menacing attack with pawn h5, looking to not only open up the file for the rook, but also try and open up the diagonal for the queen-bishop battery. So if we look how the game progressed, after c4, h4, the H-file did open up, and eventually we got into a very sharp position with opposite side castling. And you know, positions like this, both players want to attack on the side where their opponent's king is.
Yes, and I was preparing this variation actually for the white color during US Championship. So this is very similar to the main line that we can get, just we have different colors. So I think Yaro may be even in his prep understanding what is happening in this game.
That's right, and I really like the sequence of moves that Sam played with c5 followed by bishop c6, where there's long-term ideas of exploiting the diagonal and coordinating both the bishop and the rook, and maybe some potential checkmate ideas on this h1 square. And it's usually not a good sign when the queen is aligned with the bishop. And of course, white has to be very careful here. A few more moves have been played after bishop g5, bishop e7, bishop d2, knight f6, unleashing the bishop, creating the pin on the knight, bishop c3, and rook h6 brings us to the current position where it seems like white has a lot of issues to deal with.
Absolutely. And Sam won yesterday, very nice game, so he may be on fire to win another one today.
That's right. It seems like he's going all out for the win with the black pieces.
Yes.
I mean, why not when your opponent plays a3 on move 1? So we can imagine that black's attack is only going to get stronger with rook h8 on the horizon, and I would feel very uncomfortable for white. Not to mention that there's potential ideas with c4, maybe disturbing the bishop, and I mean e4 is a very big target, and the knight currently can't move because it's pinned.
Yes. But let's look maybe at the tournament B. There is an interesting position that Sergei Matsenko has against Josh Friedel.
That's right, and
I think the position is especially interesting for Josh Friedel, who is pawn up.
Yeah, we can see that it was actually a very positional middle game from a Catalan opening, which now has transpired into a very seemingly strategic endgame, where black is up a pawn, but can you really admire this structure from black, especially this bishop on a8?
I don't admire it, but I always admire when I'm material up. So
That's
I like
right.
that.
I mean, would you prefer the extra pawn or just the clearly superior rook on a7 and bishop on g2?
I think the issue is that white's going to play rook c7 and then get the pawn back anyway, but then we will end up with some drawish rook endgame.
And that's possible sometimes positions like this. If black can maybe give back a pawn and activate the bishop, activate the rook, then the position can be drawn relatively quickly. But I would imagine that Sergei Matsenko is the one playing for a win in this game.
Really? I'm not sure, because if you don't play rook c7 now and I play just bishop b7, I can then move with the king, defend the pawn forever. Yeah.
I see. So I guess it's a question of whether white can kind of make use of the temporary advantage. When you have more active pieces, you want to be quick with your play. You don't want to resort to slower plans. And we can see, yeah, black has a plan of perhaps bringing the king in. And I can imagine rook c7 is a candidate move that Sergei is considering. And it seems to be winning back the pawn no matter what. I mean, rook b6 would not be playable because of rook c8 check winning the bishop. And meanwhile, I mean, at any time, white can just take the pawn and get a maybe slightly better rook endgame.
And we have a comment from YouTube asking, why are we not showing evaluation? We are not using any engines during this analysis, so that's why there is no evaluation. We really want to explain the game, understand what is happening in the position. So we feel that if we have the computer there telling us the evaluation, we would lose the really nature of understanding the position. And
that's very true. And we don't have a Maurice Ashley we can send to for all the engine analysis. Yeah. But having said that, we do want to make it instructive for the viewers. So we will be keeping an eye on the YouTube chat. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, let us know, and we'll try and make it engaging for the viewers. So with that, let's move on to some other interesting games. Another game that caught my eye in Group B is the battle between Alejandro Ramirez and Robert Alcazarian, which featured a very unusual opening. And I actually want to go back and see how Alejandro played in this opening, and maybe ask you if you've seen anything like this before. We had a symmetrical English, which seemed pretty standard, until Alejandro went for a very creative and unusual knight maneuver, knight e1, knight d3, and knight e4. You don't see this every day.
I don't, but we have to keep in mind that Alejandro, he is the coach of SLU team, so they may have many preparations with the top GMs here.
That's very true. I mean, I know Alejandro specifically spends a lot of time with opening preparation, and if I'm not mistaken, he has some specialized computer built for chess, built for analyzing openings and delving deep into opening theory. But knights on d3 and e4 without moving the center pawns?
The knights are attacking c5. The knight can, take the bishop when it wants to.
That's very true. The knights exert a lot of pressure on black's setup, and that's probably what Alejandro is going for. Rather than controlling the center with the pawns, he's controlling the center with the minor pieces. Let's zoom forward, because the position got even spicier after development was completed. Alejandro went for the f4 thrust, trying to destabilize black's central pawn on e5 and forcing the trade, which maybe created some tactical possibilities against the king side with a nice open diagonal for the bishop. I can very easily envision ideas like king h1, rook g1, and there's definitely some attacking potential for whites. So if we go forward even further, f5 was played. I have to say I'm very impressed with Alejandro so far. I think he's playing very creative chess. This does remind me kind of the style of Vladimir Kramnik, who is known for playing like these ready English positions with the double fianchetto, and Kramnik may be known as a more positional player, but I've seen many Kramnik games where he has this sort of setup with bishop b2, with f-pawn lunges forward, and I mean, black seems to be under major pressure.
Especially when we see the bishop on b2. I like how bishops can be kind of backstage and background, but be so powerful. We saw it yesterday in the game of, now remind me, who was that person?
I think there were a good number of
there was a bishop
yesterday.
on b7 that was very powerful. Now we have bishop on b2 together with the knight on d3. This cooperation is just great for white. So I do think that black may face some troubles here.
That's true. And Alejandro played somewhat of a surprising move here. Given that he is attacking, he actually played queen h5, going for a queen trade, which is a bit suspicious, but maybe he's trying to continue the attack even without queens on the board. If we imagine some predicted line like queen take h5, knight take h5, we can see that there's a very juicy target on g6 with rook g4 on the horizon, still looming ideas of king h1, rook g1. And this sort of position says that you don't always need a queen to attack your opponent's king.
Yes, but when we go all the way to the current position, I'm a little worried about what's happening here.
Yeah, a few more moves have been played. Actually, black did not capture on h5. Black captured on g3. What is this move?
There may be a tactical trick with
Queen
knight
take
a5.
h6. So white is, what just happened there?
Because
Bishop take g3.
Yes.
Oh, the knight was on g3. Okay, I thought there was a pawn on g3. So the bishop traded for the knight on g3, queens got traded on h6, and now knight a5.
With the threat of bishop b5 and pinning the knight and the rook.
Yeah, it looks like a very complex battle. Like black wants to exploit maybe the awkwardness of white's pieces, but it's a question of whether white can maybe exploit black's weakened kingside, especially these double h-pawns. The bishop's still beautifully placed on b2. Any predictions what white might play here?
I think my prediction is that white will move something like rook g4 and after bishop b5 just to sacrifice the exchange to go maybe knight f4 and try to utilize the bishop on b2 with some tricks with knight h5, knight f6. There is some future in that position. We have to think about the knight on g5. That is so useless. It cannot go anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of making it actually work. If we imagine like bishop take f1, king take f1, black might get some counterplay with rook take d2. And positions like this, you really want to seize initiative. And when you're the one attacking, you don't want to give the initiative to your opponent. So white does have to be careful with maybe letting black get too many strong threats.
And we have a result in Group B where Dinara Saduakasova drew against JJ Alimarandi.
Well, let's
see
go to that game. I will say that I don't think either of us were taking a look at that game earlier. We see what seems to be a very equal position coming from a Catalan opening. And we saw this yesterday in one of the games where, like in these Catalan positions, the middle game can be very sharp, but when things get traded, when the center kind of liquidates, it's left with very symmetrical pawn structure. And that's what we see here. I don't think we need to spend too much time delving into this game.
But I'm interested in the game Stukopin Andrei and Belos Vladimir. They're both teammates at the UTRGV University. So let's see how they are playing against each other, because they must know each other very well.
That's right. And I actually want to show the opening in that game because it was what you see in Scholastic tournaments, a very symmetrical king's pawn opening with really not too much impressive opening preparation. I mean, I recently was at the K6 Elementary Nationals in Nashville with over 2,000 young players, and I saw positions like this in maybe, I don't want to say every other game, but a good portion of the games. So I think because they know each other so well, because they're from the same team, they might be just going for a drawish line just to save energy for the rest of the tournament.
It's possible. On the other hand, I know Andrei Stukopin, I was at the university when he was there as well, and he's a fighting player. He wants to fight when he has white pieces. So he might just start with something not risky and then see if he can push for more.
That's very true. Let's go back to the Sam Sevian game because a few moves have been played, and I mean the position is looking, I don't want to say gruesome for white, but a bit problematic for white, given that black has pretty much optimized the rooks, bishop still on c6, and it's Zherebuk's move he's thinking, and I mean what to do for white?
That's a very good question, and Yaro has only 22 minutes to figure it out.
That's right. Maybe the better question is, what is a threat for black? Sometimes in this position, when you're defending, you don't necessarily want to think about what you want to do. You want to think about what your opponent wants to do and how you either prevent it or counterattack. In this case, after the move bishop take f6, black might be considering just simply improving the bishop with bishop d4 and further optimizing the pieces. So I think the question for white is, how do you deal with the pin against the knight? And I mean, how can you maybe improve the position and not let black optimize even further? Do you see any moves that that white might be considering here?
I just want to go back for a second to what you said. So when we think about black's threat, if I was black and I had 3 moves in a row I could do, I would just play bishop d4, rook h3, and bishop takes d4, and I'm taking rook takes g3, and the position is won. So that is a very simple tactic, but it may be difficult for white to defend against it, because the h file is an issue, and now you have to think, okay, what am I going to do here?
That's true, and a move has been played. Yaro played rook takes c5, grabbing the undefended pawn, but I'm very curious if bishop d4 can't be played anyway, and we can see there's a lot of tactical targets that white has to be concerned about, with the rook kind of exposed on c5, of course the king on g1, the knight and queen aligned with the bishop. So I'd be very curious if some move like bishop d4 can still be played with your idea of rook h3 and going after the g3 targets.
Yes, and I don't want to be too crazy, but even bishop d4 and bishop takes f2 can be an interesting line, because whenever the queen captures on f2, we have rook h1. Whenever knight captures, the queen on f3 is hanging, and so the king usually has to capture on f2. But then rook h2, and the bishop on c6 is really strong. The rooks can be strong. If I was white, I would be worried about this position for sure.
Yeah, just to illustrate a move like rook takes c4, bishop take f2. It feels weird taking a pawn that's defended, that appears to be defended by 3 things. But what you mentioned, a move like queen take f2 runs into rook h1, while the knight can't take because it's pinned, and if the king takes, maybe this isn't the most accurate line that black can play right away, but ideas like rook h2 or queen b6, sometimes it's all about looking for ways to grab the initiative. And at this high elite level with GMs, they're looking for forcing lines. They're looking for variations that they can predict, and lines that are forcing that their opponent has to go into. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sam will be calculating the forcing moves in this position. Now we should note he is running low on time. He is below 10 minutes with still, if we get to the current position, after rook takes c5, he has about 15 moves to make until time control, which is actually not a lot of time. That's maybe a minute per move on average. So maybe a position like this, he has to rely on intuition.
Yes, it's a very tactical position, but when you are low on time, it's difficult. You have to be precise. You don't want to just capture something, sacrifice, and hope for good. You really have to calculate. So, of course, he's not in such a great position with this time. But to slow down a little bit, I would like to see the position of Varakobian against Jeffrey Zhong, the key matchup, because we have an endgame there where the black pawn may be actually weak. And I think Var can be having some tiny advantage.
Yes, move pawn e4 to e3. Maybe a bit unexpected. And the king is actually doing a very good job at blockading the pawn, putting constant pressure on the pawn. And the king can't easily be removed from e2. So I'm a bit curious about the reasoning behind pawn e3. I wonder if there's some liquidation that's about to take place. I mean, there's a lot of tension, not only between the bishops, but also between the rooks. So
what I think about move 3, if you don't make e3, then I just take the bishop and push the king further, king e3. And then you have still the same issue. You are worrying with blockade, and the pawn on e4 is weak.
That's true. I wonder if e3 was kind of a desperado move where Jeffrey realizes that the pawn is going to be lost in a lot of lines, and he's trying to make the most that he can of the pawn. This is kind of a kamikaze move, going for perhaps a positional sacrifice where even if the pawn is taken, then the e-file can open up with perhaps some counterplay for the rook on e8. So another game that is catching my attention that I think we should go back to is a game between Alejandro Ramirez and who is he playing? He's playing Robert Agasarian, which we were taking a look at earlier. And he played the move knight f4, which we were analyzing some ideas like this where black could win the exchange, but white appears to be getting a lot of counterplay. And we mentioned earlier that the knight could potentially go to h5 and come into f6, but there's another path for the knight too to come into d5 with the mate threat of knight e7. And this is a classic mating idea, just to demonstrate for the viewers. Let's imagine black takes on c4. Actually, knight d5 right away would not be good because of knight take b2. So after pawn takes c5, maybe this isn't the best example line, but if black plays some waiting moves, it's possible to have to deal with this threat at some point with knight e7 check.
Yeah, let's just look at the bishop on b2, the bishop on g2. I mean, they are just dominating the board. Like if you think about these bishops being maybe better than a rook.
Right. Now the question for black, should you take the rook on c4 or should you maybe focus on defending? What would be your first instinct?
What I like while not taking the rook is moves like bishop c6 at least trade one of the bishops. But I don't know if we are in time to do that because knight h5 is a serious threat with knight f6 coming up.
That's right. And I should point out that they're only on move 23, and Robert has less than 10 minutes on the clock. And this does not appear to be a fun position for black to play, especially with the time dwindling down. And I mean, it just seems so much more fun for white. And sometimes when you reach the time pressure situation, you want to be the one with initiative. You want to be the one making the threats, put your opponent under pressure, because that's usually what will provoke blunders.
I think this is a very difficult situation for black, and he has 7 minutes to figure out what to do here.
That's right.
And he took the pawn, so he made a move. Bishop takes f5 is what happened on the board.
Grabbing the pawn, but when pawns are taken, files open up, and we can see the rook is aligned with the undefended bishop on f5. Is knight d5 not just attacking two things? With the threat of knight e7 and rook take f5, what would black do in this position?
After knight d5, I can maybe just capture rook takes d5,
maybe
and then capture on c4. But if I go knight h5, and I don't allow this capture.
So you're suggesting knight h5 here, because the knight is clearly more powerful than the rook, right?
Yes, that's what I think.
And knight h5 hits the bishop, threatens a very nasty knight f6 check. I'm sure Alejandro is calculating the options. Sometimes when you have the momentum going for you in a game, and you're the one attacking, you want to consider multiple ways to progress, and you always want to strive to play the best move. So if you see a move like knight d5 and it looks good, you don't want to just play it immediately. You always want to strive to play the best move in the position. And I'm sure Alejandro is calculating some of the forcing lines, trying to make the best decision possible.
So before we see what is happening in the game, let's look at Peter Prohaska against Daniel Friedman.
Right, and that's a new game that I don't believe we've looked at so far. Seems like a somewhat strategic minor piece endgame.
I think yesterday the theme was opposite colored bishops, and today we have same colored bishops.
That's right. There's been at least a few games today with bishops of the same color. Now, we should note in this position it's equal material. Both sides have 4 pawns, light squared bishop, and a knight. Normally, bishop endings of the same color, you want your pawns on opposite color of the bishop. And if we notice in this position, all of white's pawns placed on dark squares, which probably benefits white given that there's light squared bishops on the board. And if we should point out that that black's pawn on e6 and pawn on f5, they're fixed on light squares. And this could be perhaps a slight long-term positional weakness for black. And I wouldn't be surprised if white tries to perhaps play for the win, not only with these weak pawns, but also with the outside passed a pawn.
I think the passed pawn, that's the key role of this position. The passed pawn will have a really important part where it will be distracting the black pieces while white can attack the other pawns in the center and on the king side.
That's very true. And I should just give some kind of basic lesson about pawns, because usually at the beginning of the game or middle game, center pawns are more valuable. But in the end game, if you have a outside passed pawn, that can be extremely valuable because it can act as a decoy, and it could perhaps decoy black's pieces into moving towards the queen side, while white can try and take advantage of the positional weaknesses on the king side. So I'm sure Peter is the one looking to play for a win here. And
we have a result of a game. Vasil Durarbaile won another game against Indic Alexander this time.
Wow, and this is a game that we have not paid attention to. Let's see how he won. This brings Vasil to 2 wins in a row, a perfect start for him. And we talked to him yesterday, and he said he's in the midst of completing finals. He had a final paper to complete, I believe, today, and a final exam. And he can't get off to a better start than this. Yeah,
and unfortunately not a very good start for Alexander Indic, who lost the first round against Var Akobian and now lost another round against Vasil Durarbaile.
That's right. Let's take a look at how the position transpired. Vasil actually had a very classic imbalance where it's queen and knight versus queen and bishop. And the general rule is queen and knight can coordinate so much better than queen and bishop, because the queen and knight move differently, so they don't overlap each other in certain situations, and they can target any square on the board, while the bishop is limited just to the color square that it's on. So already at this point, it seems like Vasil had a very pleasant position, knight on d4, very nicely centralized, and black's pawns, you notice they're fixed on dark squares, which are perhaps long-term targets for the white pieces.
And look at the bishop on d7. I mean, the bishop has no future. It cannot go anywhere. That's very sad.
Such a sad bishop, yeah. With I mean, the pawns are on light squares in the center, and like the bishop is even restricted by white's pawns on the queen side. So a lot of pawns restricting this very sad bishop in the position. And Vasil has seemed to have a few ways of winning this position, going for the king side attack, but also maybe going for the positional weaknesses on the queen side. And it seems very straightforward from here, where b4 can't be defended, and it was just a matter of technique, really. Knight c2, and the pawns just fall. And knight take a3, and black just resigns given that knight c4 is coming, and the passed pawns will prove decisive.
Yeah, so this was a very interesting game. Vasil with another win. He's up to a very good start. So let's look now at the game Jaro Jerebuk against Sam Savian, because there was so much tactics happening, so much to calculate, and now there's an endgame.
What happened? This looks like a completely new position. I mean, we were having so much fun earlier debating or discussing the potential future of the attack for Sam, and now we have a very dry obstacle bishop ending. I wouldn't be surprised if the game ends in a draw very soon. We should at least go back and see how this happened. Because many moves have been played. They're already approaching move 40. I can see that rook h1 was played, which is maybe the first step in simplifying the position. Queen take h1, and we had this material imbalance with 2 rooks for white and a queen for black, and things just got traded very quickly. I can see that maybe this was all calculated out, and maybe Sam saw nothing more than just to go for this line and be safe and just take a draw.
I mean, we have to remember that he had only 8 minutes, so it's really not enough time to calculate crazy variations. But I do feel the position had potential for more than just these trades.
Yeah, sometimes, especially early on in the tournament, you don't want to take too many risks, especially with time ticking down. It's clear what happened, that he saw a bailout line where he's okay taking a draw. He had a very nice win yesterday, and going into round 3 with 1.5 out of 2, that's not a bad start for him.
Yes. So they are still playing, but our predictions are that it's going to be draw soon. So let's move on to Jeffrey Chong and Vara Kobian.
That's right, and we have some developments in that game too. Sticking with the theme of bishops of the same color, we can apply the rule that we saw in the previous position. Look at all of black's pawns and look at all of white's pawns. All of white's pawns on light squares, all of black's pawns on dark squares. Who does this benefit, Katerina?
Let's see. I think this clearly benefits white. That would be my guess.
Yeah, of course white. I mean, these pawns are
the pawn,
fixed.
not only the pawns are on the dark side, but also I think it's very important to see the pawn on d5, which can just run to a queen. And it can be a huge issue for black to be always worrying for this pawn for its potential. Black doesn't have a chance to create a pass pawn because a6, b5, I mean, that doesn't have any future. So not only I can be capturing the pawns on dark squares, but the d pawn, that's a real problem. So I think Jeffrey will have to figure out how to defend this position.
Yeah, I will say that Kobian excels in these positions where he has just a small advantage going into the endgame. And I've only played him once in tournament chess, but he very methodically outplayed me from what seemed to be an equal position. But he's very good at building up small advantages. He has amazing endgame technique. And we can see here there's many trumps for him in the position, given the defended pass pawn on d5, and also given just black's pawns are fixed on dark squares. h4 is a long-term weakness, and a7 is a long-term weakness. So I wouldn't be surprised if he can manage to grind this out.
I think the interesting thing that we can notice here, that maybe white can even trade rooks and win this position, because I can win the h4 pawn when the rooks are off, and the d pawn will be running.
That's true. I mean, black probably wants to keep rooks on the board, and if black wants to trade anything, it's the dark squared bishops, because white's dark squared bishop has a lot more potential to cause damage to black's position. It is a question, though. I don't think white can initiate a rook trade anytime soon. But maybe it's just a matter of activating the rook. Perhaps Kobian is considering a move like rook f6, try and get into the black territory, maybe invade via h6 or even c6. And I can imagine that that white can be making pretty clear progress here. Not to mention there's some future plan of a5 trying to destabilize this pawn chain on the queen side.
Yes. So let's move on to another game. I think there is a very interesting position in the game Stukopin, Andrei, and Belos Vladimir. There's this knight h6. That looks so dangerous for black.
Stukopin, for some reason I'm having a hard time finding
That's
that game.
tournament B.
Tournament B, okay. Let's try and find that game. Wow, knight h6.
I mean, the king is weak. There can be some mating threats. If you immediately capture g-pawn take h6, there is rook f7 checkmate. So, and if you take with king, there is rook h3 coming up. You have to maybe play something like knight h4.
So just to demonstrate those lines, of course pawn can't take because of rook f7 mate. And you said after king take, rook h3?
No, you have to play knight h4, Knight h4 actually cannot be played because rook take
just
h4.
Rook take h4. So king g5 is not legal. The knight can't be taken.
So but now what do you want to do? You probably have to move away the queen, and there is queen g8 fork. I'm attacking the king, I'm attacking the rook on e6.
That's right, and we dismissed this game earlier thinking it was going to be a very boring draw given the symmetry in the opening, given that these players are teammates, but it looks like Stu Koppen maybe found some way to play for an advantage.
But remember, I told you, I just thought that he's playing something very easy, no risks, 2-result game, and just hope for a push, and it looks like he found something.
That's
now, I believe
strategy.
we have a result. Do we have another result in Group A? With Sam Savian, Yaro Zerebuk.
That game did end in a draw. Opposite color bishop ending, really nothing to play for either side. I don't think we have to stick with that game. Should we stick with this game? I mean, can we safely conclude that Black is in massive trouble here, and this might even be close to resignable, given that if the knight can't be taken, the knight is going to come to f5, as Yasser Seirawan likes to say, knife f5. Amazing attacking piece, followed by an idea like rook h3.
And king take h6 happened. So what Black will try after rook h3, probably capture the rook with a queen, and that would happen as well. So Black will try to build a fortress to draw a game. I mean, knight and rooks, there can be very good defenders, but I
can't imagine Black creating a fortress in this
yeah.
position. Magnus Carlsen has this well-known quote, "I don't believe in fortresses." And a position like this, I mean, White has a pawn and a queen for rook and knight. So
unfortunately, I think that was the only try that Black has. Otherwise, to resign. And we have to remember that these players, they really want to fight. They want to, play their best and see if they can push for a couple more moves and see that maybe opponents can make a mistake as well.
That is true, but I have to put heavy money on Andre for converting this game. So any other games to take a look at? There are a number of developments happening in Time Trouble.
So what about the key matchup, Kamil Dragun and Tatev Abrahamian? We left it where there was some attack, and now we see that Kamil is a pawn up.
And guess what? Another position of bishops of the same color, which I don't think we've looked at since the position liquidated. If we go back to see how everything got traded, rook's traded on the f-file twice for that matter. And White is a pawn up with potential outside pass pawn, and that's exactly what happened.
But what we see here compared to the other game is that the dark square, the pawns for Black are on dark squares and the bishop cannot attack them. So it's not that easy for Kamil to actually do something with his bishop other than support the passed pawn, whereas Tatev can try to attack the pawns in the white camp if the bishop tries to go away from the diagonal.
That's true, and I don't believe that Black will have an easy time attacking this. It's pretty immaculate pawn chain. The only way to try and attack the pawn chain is to get the bishop to b1, but that square is currently off limits. And meanwhile, maybe a pawn break like a4 could be considered, but that could run into b4. So I guess it's a question of, really it's a question of how is White making progress in this position.
I think there can be big chances of Black just holding this position, because if White tries to put the bishop on the d1 h5 diagonal, then I can go bishop c2, bishop b1 and do some annoying stuff there.
It's actually true. Like, no, we just said that Magnus Carlsen doesn't believe in fortresses, but the king is just going to stay where it is on f6. The bishop will stay on d1, controlling the squares. So Black actually has a wall controlled by the king and the bishop, and it's not easy for White to break through the wall. As you mentioned, if the bishop tries to maneuver to this diagonal, it allows Black some counterplay on the queen side. So I'd be very curious to see how Kamil attempts to win this game.
Yes, but what about other games? Let's see Alejandro Ramirez against Robert Aghassarian.
Yeah, we saw that position had a lot of fire earlier, and it seems to be a theme for today that positions that are very sharp in the middle game are transpiring into very strategic endgames, we can see that Alejandro did not fully lose the exchange, or if he did lose the exchange, he won it back. He did play this knight d5 move, threatening the mate on e7, and I guess they went into a line that we were looking at: rook take d5, bishop take d5, knight takes c4, b takes c4, and if we go forward to the current position, anything to make of this? Somewhat imbalanced.
Yes, and it is the rook on e-file. That's a great rook with some threats. Rook e2 attacking pawns. So what white can do here? I mean, bishops are usually better than knights in endgames because they can support and they can also defend. But how do they coordinate themselves here?
It's true, and I mean, yeah, the rook-bishop combination is usually better than the rook-knight combination, but in these sort of minor piece with rook endings, it's all about optimizing both pieces and trying to pressure the opponent. We should point out that if I'm doing my math correctly, black is up a pawn, but it doesn't feel like black's up a pawn given these very ugly double H pawns, double isolated pawns on the H file, isolated pawn on F7. Meanwhile, white's pawn structure also looks a bit ugly, isolated pawn on G2 on G3. But I really like this pawn setup with C4 and D5. I mean, this pawn is going to stay for a while on D5, and it's going to give white some long-term push. And maybe this is what's going to determine the game if Alejandro can optimize the bishop and the rook.
But now white is really facing an issue. Like, what am I going to do? Rook e2 is a threat because then I'm attacking the pawn, and there's no rook f2 because knight h3 fork.
That's a good point. Yeah, rook f2 would be a pretty tragic blunder. I'm wondering that if instead of white going for defense, can you go for offense? Maybe play a move like rook f6 and go for a pure counterplay. And if we imagine that that rook e2 is played, perhaps something like rook c6, and there's already mate threat on c8, and maybe you either give up the pawn or later you'll play bishop c3 and defend the pawn. It seems like still a very double-edged position.
But you have to be, I think, a little careful with rook f6. What if after rook f6 I put rook e2 check? And you cannot play king f2 because I have rook b1 attacking the bishop and threatening knight e4.
Sorry, you want to play rook e1 check after rook e6?
Yes.
Let's say king f2.
And now I go rook b1, I'm attacking the bishop and I'm threatening for rook knight
that's pretty
e4.
beautiful, yeah. The bishop's hanging, knight e4 is coming. That's a good move. You have to keep in mind that at various points, white can try and just lunge forward with the pawn. Of course, in this position, it's not going to work. That is a nice line, though. And if king g2, you want to play rook e2 check?
Most likely, yes. Oh,
Rook
bishop
e2.
f6. That's what happened in the game, by the way.
So
but
white chose a different move. I actually like bishop f6. This is another resource that we didn't consider. I was only looking at rook f6, but bishop f6 puts some pressure on the knight. Also controls the d8 square, which if the pawn gets to d7, it would be game over. So black does have to worry about the always looming d6 push. And meanwhile, maybe rook e2. Is rook e2 still playable, or is it too risky to go for?
Or the question is if it's necessary. Maybe I can play knight e4, but I don't want to get too...
Actually, knight e4 looks like a triple fork. That's not a bad move.
But I don't want to get too exhausted by taking the pawns and then allowing d6, d7, and then I'm in trouble.
That's right. Black always has to keep an eye on the d5 pawn. And I mean, sometimes material is not as important as the power of the passed pawn. And black always has to keep this pawn at bay. Robert Agasarian his time is ticking, and they have about 10 moves to make time control. We can see rook e2 was played. Going for counterplay, and always have to keep in mind, sometimes the rook cutting off the king on the second rank, combined with potential knight checks. Knight f3, of course, not a move that's threatened, but white has to be a little bit concerned about the safety of the king.
Yes, now the question is what to do with white. If I want to push the pawn or defend the pawn on d2.
Yeah,
I can also play something like d3.
D3, just simply Simply making sure you have kind of a mini pawn chain. You don't really care about the pawn on a2. If rook take a2, I assume you would just push d6.
Yes.
So d3 could be an interesting resource. Maybe that would trigger black to play a move like rook d2, going after the d3 pawn. Though it's not, yeah, it's really not a clear position, and I have to admit I wouldn't be comfortable playing either side in time trouble. That's probably why I'm sitting here, and the players are sitting over there.
Maybe after rook d2, I can take the knight, play rook f3, and try to play rook e3. The thing is, I really do not want to connect the pawns, so I will be very, very careful of doing this. But maybe rook e3 is the future, because then I can push my pawn d6, d7.
That's right, but we have to keep in mind, if white goes all out for this d6 push and it doesn't work, black has extra material. Black could start attempting to win the a2 pawn, and you have to be careful as white not to, especially not to fix the kingside pawn structure and not get your desired d6 push.
Yes, and Alejandro doesn't have too much time to calculate if he can go for his bishop takes g5 and rook f3, rook e3. So probably he will go with something that's safe.
And just for a moment, I do want to go on to the Stukopin-Ballas game. We kind of dismissed it earlier. We've already dismissed this game twice, thinking that it was going to be a draw, thinking that white was just winning. But now we see an interesting example of the coordination of the knight and the rook. And I'm curious here, is black having some sort of counterplay with the mating attack? King g3 ideas looming.
Oh, this is very interesting. White now cannot take the pawn on e5, because if white takes, queen takes e5, I have rook g3, and then the king will always run into the fork with the queen, like king f1, rook f3, and you cannot play now king e1 because of knight d3.
So the king would have to go back to g1.
And then I go rook g3 again, and you cannot go king f2 because of queen d3.
Because of knight d3, right.
So the queen has to be careful of going too close to the king where there can be some forks.
That's actually a beautiful perpetual check. You basically just keep moving your rook along wherever the king is going, and even if king h2, we keep checking the king, and it doesn't seem like white can escape this. I would be curious, is there a way to like sack the queen and try and get the queenside pawns running? If we look at this line.
And we also have to keep in mind that black just wants to go king g3 and rook d1 checkmate.
That's very true too. Yeah, king g3, rook d1. And white's up a ton of material, queen and 3 pawns for rook and knight, but sometimes king safety can be more important than material. I like the way Ballas is fighting back. He has to be, it has to be somewhat admired here that he has not given up and he's trying to create as much fighting chances as possible. So any other games to look at as we're kind of in the heat of time trouble?
And we also have a special guest waiting.
We do have a special guest. Should we take a quick break and go to that? We'll be back with a special guest right after this.
A moment comes in chess when you need to test yourself at a different level. Chess24 Premium offers the tools that you need to reach your maximum potential. From hundreds of interactive video lessons to becoming part of the Chess24 community. You can analyze with friends or coach your students live. You get 24/7 coverage of chess news and events, access to premium analysis and commentary, and the chance to interact with grandmasters and other top players and coaches. Get advice from the best and even challenge them to a battle. Be the best chess player you can be. It's time to level up your game with Chess24 Premium membership.
This is a crucial situation in this game. Matheny must make a move, but what will it be? All eyes are on Matheny.
Could make a move a lot easier if you weren't doing that right next to me.
It doesn't bother me. Check.
The St. Louis Chess Club, celebrating 10 years of promoting, teaching, and playing the game of chess. Visit the St. Louis Chess Club and help celebrate our 10th anniversary.
Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Women Grandmaster Katerina Nemcova, and I'm here with a special guest, the Scholastic manager for the St. Louis Chess Club, Karim Talhouni.
Hi everybody.
So Karim, can you introduce your work within the Scholastic field?
I'd be happy to, sure. Would you like me to look at you or the camera?
The camera.
You want the camera on? Sure. So the Scholastic team at the St. Louis Chess Club runs a wide portfolio of activities, starting with first and foremost our chess instruction in the schools. For example, in our past semester, the spring semester, we had around close to 300 chess classes every week, each class running about 45 minutes to an hour, happening in over 90 schools around the St. Louis area. So that's our biggest focus, is teaching chess in the schools. And we do that to a wide range of schools. We're very fortunate that we have such a generous founder and board that we can provide, and corporate partners, nonprofit partners, that we can provide chess instruction at no cost to many of the city's schools, including our biggest initiative with the St. Louis public school system.
Oh wow, so you talk about so many schools. How do you measure the impact on community? Do you know in numbers how many schools, how many children participate in these events?
Yeah, so like for instance in our spring semester, we're over 90 schools all around the city. And the average class size is really anywhere from 8 to 12 students per class. That's what we've been finding that the classes is. So if you just do the math, and my math isn't that great, but it's at least 1,000 kids per semester, and in often cases it's more, because one school often will have more than just the one class happening at a time. So in some schools they get 5, 10, even 15 hours a week of chess at their school.
Wow, that's a great promotion of chess.
Yeah.
I heard that there is also a new Scholastic circuit. What
yeah.
can you tell about that?
Sure. So that's one of our other big pieces of the program are the Scholastic tournaments that we run. We run one every month, and I think we're the only organization in St. Louis to keep one going throughout the year. There are some other great organizations out there doing good work with tournaments, but they follow the school year closely. So they start in, say, October, they end in April. We run 12 months a year. And but during the school years when we run our Grand Prix, so we have our own version of the Grand Prix kind of cycle. And that finished with the April tournament. And we just had a banquet a couple of weeks ago at St. Louis University, who's our tournament partner. I definitely have to say thank you to St. Louis University and Will Perkins, that's our partner there. They make the space available to us at no cost, so we can offer our tournaments to the kids at a very, very reasonable price.
This is so wonderful to provide chess to so many children. I mean, these schools in St. Louis, these children, they must be so happy to play chess. What do you hear from them?
Yeah. We try to visit the schools quite a bit. And whenever we do, we just see a lot of excited kids. They do love the game, even if they don't know all the moves right away, but we get them there slowly but surely.
So can you tell a little bit more about who supports these programs, these initiatives?
Yeah, and I definitely would probably if you have a chance to interview our development department, they're the ones that really they know the most about the funding and so on, but we definitely have some big partners. Again, first of all, starting with our founders and the board, we have corporate partners, Monsanto, Emerson, Ascension. These are some of the big donors, and again, there are many more, and also some of them wish to remain anonymous though, and so the development department knows better which ones to talk about. So I probably should just stop there and let them handle. But we have just many, many supporters, and so many individuals as well that give time, and whatever contributions they can. And I know I'm not thanking enough, but there's not really enough time to thank all the people that come together for it.
Yes, it's incredible initiative and opportunity for children. Yeah. Now, what if there are some viewers who want to help and support this program? What can they do?
Well, definitely the first thing is to just send us an email. We have our own email address for the Scholastic Department, scholastics@stlouischessclub.org. And if they send us an email expressing their wish, we can get them involved right away. They're obviously also welcome to visit the club if they're close by and ask for us that way. We'll be happy to come on over from our office to the club and meet them and talk to them. So, yeah, many ways to get involved.
Perfect. So thank you so much for introducing us to this scholastic work. Now, is there something else you would like to say that maybe was not mentioned?
Well, there's just so many, mostly just, you can never say thank you enough for all the great things that happen here, but definitely, we're so fortunate that we have the chance to do the Boy Scout Merit Badge workshops that we do. Again, with our tournament series as well, we have the community, we have outreach community where we bring chess out into the city and the outdoors, especially in the summer. Chess pocket parks, we call them, here and about the city. So there's just so many great things that we're able to do because of the fantastic support and resources and community behind the organization.
I always admire the St. Louis Chess Club, how they work with super GMs like Magnus Carlsen, inviting them here, but also caring about the little children and people who cannot afford maybe like private lessons and try to make outreach. So thank you so much, Karin, for all the work that you do.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we will have a short break and then we will get back because we see some games are ending.
All right.
Weekend vacation, a one-tank trip in a nearby city you won't want to skip. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton. There's museums full of art and super fun slides. Upside down concretes, twisty turny rides. Houses full of magic, some with butterflies. Gardens growing flowers, parks with giant eyes. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton.
Question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's a little something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2, and now try, because could I do it?
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not allowed.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. d5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think e5 is question. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.
This August, the best chess players in the world are coming to St. Louis for the Grand Chess Tour. The St. Louis Rapid and Blitz and Sinkfield Cup tournaments will feature the world's best right here in St. Louis. St. Louis Chess Club is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and these tournaments will be a highlight you won't want to miss. For tickets and more information, go to stlouischessclub.org.
Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Women Grandmaster Katerina Nemcova, and I'm here with International Master Eric Rosen. Now we have a lot of games that finished, so let's see first maybe how VAR played against Jeffrey Zhang.
That's right. A lot of games are done. A lot happened while you were doing the interview and I was gone. But here we're back. VAR Kobian has defeated Jeffrey Zhang. As we saw earlier, he had a clear endgame advantage. He was able to increase his advantage further. The final position we see White is up a pawn, still has a passed D pawn, has his outside passed H pawn, and Jeffrey just gave up in this position.
Wow, what a great result for VAR. He is starting with 2 wins, so he's up to a very good start.
That's right. Tough result for Jeffrey, and tough result for me, given that Jeffrey was my pick for this tournament. But you're so far having a very good pick with VAR being the predicted winner.
And we also can take a look. There is a decisive result in the game Stukopin against Belos. The 2 UTRGV teammates actually did not make a draw.
That's right, and we should go back to the key moment. We were looking at this position earlier, and we were pretty impressed with the chances that Black was creating, going for some kind of mating attack with the rook, with the knight, the rook, and the king. But Stukopin found just a very simple resource that we didn't really consider in this position, just queen take d3, sacrificing the queen for the rook, and just getting the pawns rolling, b5, knight c5, b6. And knights are not usually the happiest pieces defending against multiple passed pawns.
And we can also see here how the double pawn is really important, because the knight cannot stop these 2 pawns, especially when there is this double pawn. So these 3 pawns are so strong, and there is nothing. That's
right. Just to demonstrate, if the pawn wasn't on b2, then Black could potentially avoid or blockade both pawns. But here I would think that b4 is just winning with the simple threat of b5, c6. So knight versus 3 pawns. Sometimes it's a close battle, but in this case, the 3 pawns took him home.
Yes, and we also have decisive result, not decisive, a draw against Alejandro Ramirez and Robert Agassarian, and Sergei Matsenko against Josh Friedel.
Yeah, and that was a crazy game. It was very, very dynamic opening, very creative play by Alejandro. We can see the current position. If I'm counting correctly, Black is up 3 pawns. Why in the world would Agassarian take a draw being up 3 pawns? Let's just go back to see how the draw actually happened. It was some sort of perpetual check. I guess neither player wanted to play on. Even though Black is up 3 pawns, I mean, White set up with a pawn on d5, bishop on f6, rook on e5. It's pretty menacing, and it seems like Black did not want to risk it by capturing yet another pawn. Because again, it doesn't matter how many pawns you have, it matters about sometimes how far the strongest passed pawn is pushed. And perhaps Robert was just worried about the simple d6, where White would be close to a touchdown with d7 and d8.
And White king doesn't have any other chances, because the king cannot go to f4 when we in the final position.
Yeah, the final position, if we look after rook g2, king e3, rook g3.
After king f4, there is rook f3.
Rook f3, just picking up the bishop, right?
Yes, or if you, after rook g3, if you don't go king f4, you would like to go king d2, there is knight f3. So White has to go for this draw.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would be very, very curious to see what the engine says. This is a type of game where maybe you're not sure in the heat of the moment, whether one side is better, I'm sure both of the players will be checking the engine analysis after the game. But we will note again that we're not using any engine analysis. And I mean, I'm excited to check this afterwards to see if either side had a chance to play on. So we should look at the results so far. We do have a few games still pending. Let's go in and take a look at the results from Group A. We actually have 4 results that are done. Rosen has beaten Jeffrey Zhang in a very nice strategical battle. 2 out of 2 for Varakobian. We also have Vasif Torabeli defeating Alexander Injic. Not a bad start for Vasif and Rosen. Yes,
and Group B has also a very interesting situation now. We see 2 games are still pending, but Andrei Stukopin won, and Dinara has her first draw, and Alejandro, I believe he has his second draw, right?
And Sergey and Josh have actually drawn their games, so.
Oh, that's true. So we have last game in Group B, where Kamil Dragon plays against Tatev Abrahamian, and we predicted that there will be very hard to do something for White to proceed in this position. So we will see if that's going to be a decisive result.
Yeah, let's stay on this game, and let's see. I mean, any hope for White to make progress in this position? I mean, it's a very. It seems like a close battle. White has an extra pawn, but we were looking earlier. We didn't see how White's going to make further progress. Any ideas how White can proceed in this position?
White will probably play something like Bishop d3. My guess is that I can exchange the bishops because there is the passed pawn, so the pawn in the game should be winning. So Black will avoid it, playing something like Bishop d1. But then I can try maybe go King d4. I don't know how many trades are can.
That's right. I mean, okay, we can imagine maybe the king, especially with this last move, King e3. It's possible that White will actually use a pawn as a decoy on h4 and try and just try and leave it there and perhaps walk with the king d4 to c3, maybe somehow infiltrate on the queen side. Usually with these sort of king-pawn ending positions, in this case there are bishops on the board, you always want to be looking for entry points. You want to be looking how you can get your king into Black's territory. In this case, it doesn't appear like there's any entry points on the king side, given the wall that we talked about earlier. So it seems like that this is White's only hope, is to try and somehow access the a4 square and try to get the king to b5. And if White can get the king to c6, there would be 2 things for Black to worry about. Obviously, this only weak pawn on c7, and of course, still the lingering passed h-pawn, which is always a big annoyance for the Black side. So switching gears just a little bit, my co-commentator has left, and we are here with Rosen Akobian after a very nice win. Rosen, how are you feeling?
Hi, Eric. Yeah, I'm feeling good. Yeah, I think I played a pretty good game. I wasn't so sure if I had much out of the opening, but I thought I played well, in the late middle game. So maybe we can.
Sure, and I was very curious because you played Jeffrey with the same color at U.S. Championship.
Yes.
What was the psychology preparing for this game and choosing an opening, maybe finding some sort of deviation?
Well, this is my, 4th game already in Grunfeld with Jeffrey, and he beat me in the last Classic here in a very interesting game. He played great, and U.S. Championship I was pressing, but it was a draw. And this is a different line I chose to play. And we can go through this. My good friend Alex Onishuk, he always plays like this, and he played against Ray Robson in the U.S. Championship. So this knight d7 is interesting. There's a rook d8 here, main theory.
Instead of knight d7?
Yeah, rook d8, and there were also some ideas before he castled, if you go back a little bit. So another major theory is knight c6, rook b1 ideas, and a6, rook c1.
Sorry, slow down after knight c6.
Rook b1.
Rook b1?
Yeah, and if Black plays a6, you go back to rook c1.
Interesting.
So anyway, this is just lots of theory here.
And I'm sure you were looking at these lines last night?
Yeah, I was looking at this, but it's still very hard to find advantage against Grunfeld. So So let's go back to the game. So he played castle, and knight d7, d5. And I actually had this game before in the last year World Blitz Championship against Ian Nepomniachtchi, and I played c4 here in that game as well. Took knight d2, e6, b6, yeah, and he wants to play knight g4, and I played h3 against Nepo, and it was pretty equal position. But then I analyzed this f3, king f2 idea. I'm not sure if it gives much advantage, but I thought at least he wouldn't be familiar with, and I put the king on f2. But I think he reacted very well. This knight d7 was very good, and now he wants to play f5, f4 in fact, trapping my bishop. So I couldn't see anything better than just playing f4, because I don't see how to deal with this f5 move.
So were you out of preparation after knight d7?
Yeah, knight d7 was very strong by Jeffrey here. And okay, it's very sharp here. And
so at what point did you feel like the game was swaying in your favor?
Well, this is still complicated, and I took a lot of time here because bishop h3, and I didn't see much after g takes f5. And I thought this was the way to play for him. Maybe if you go back, just the move Jeffrey, we briefly analyzed after the game. Jeffrey mentioned the move instead of knight f6, e takes f4, which I think is probably good enough for equality for black. Bishop takes f4. Then I have to play knight e5. And black is very, very active here, so I think I have to take the knight. Bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, and
we'll say this does seem a lot more pleasant for black, keeping the initiative, activating the bishop.
Yeah, this is about equal. I think I go bishop d3, and so this was probably more balanced way to play. But he played knight f6, which was very interesting. I took like something like 15 minutes here because so many lines here. If let's say I try to be greedy, I think I might be in big trouble. If I take on g6, it's a very interesting line. Knight g4 check, king e2, knight takes e3, king takes e3, g takes h7, intermediate check.
For sure.
And now very important not to take this pawn, because I will get a very important tempi later on with the bishop d3 check. So he plays king h8 here, king e3, and now he takes on f4, and I have to take back in bishop h6, and I think my position is
this looks very ugly. I mean, the pawn count isn't too relevant, and black's pieces are just so well placed.
Black has very strong initiative here. I might be in big trouble here. So of course I didn't go for this, but just as an interesting position line. You know, I'm up 3 pawns, but probably in very big trouble.
And I'm sure that's why you spent so much time of delving into this.
Okay, my main concern was bishop f5. I didn't consider that much because positionally I thought I will be maybe very slightly better, because if you get to exchange the light square bishops in this line in general, it's a big accomplishment for white, just in general. So I was very happy. So the key line I think we should look at is g takes f5 instead of bishop f5. G takes,
keeping
this is
the bishops
key line,
on the board, sure.
And now I have to take on e5, knight g4, bishop g4 takes, I have to play king g2, very important move. Bishop takes e5, and if I allow him to play bishop f5, I might even be very slightly worse because of the 2 bishops. But I think I have a very important move here, bishop to h6. And this creates some problems, because now, if let's say rook e8, I have rook hf1. And it's very strong because the bishop is not coming to f5.
That's nice. I mean, the initiative is very important to restrict black and not let black activate.
Exactly. And bishop on h6 is very, very powerful. And if he goes, instead of rook e8, bishop g7, maybe that's the best line. Bishop takes, king takes, and I think maybe very slightly better for white, but probably black should be okay after bishop f5 here. So this is what I was kind of expecting. But I was very happy after bishop, he took bishop takes f5. So I took h3 to stop knight g4 finally, because I had to deal with this knight g4 the entire game. So I was happy at least to play this. And my main when I was thinking he should play e4 here actually instead of rook e8. I think maybe I'm slightly better, but I'm not sure. e4. I have to play a4. Now knight e8. So knight has to go to d6.
It's a much better square for the knight for sure.
Yeah, typical idea. So I play rook c2. Knight d6, And okay, a5, I have some rook b1 ideas. I think I have maybe a little bit of pressure, but the knight on d6 is very well placed. The bishop on g7 is strong, so I think this position is probably roughly equal, because I can never use the a1 or b2 squares. The bishop is very powerful. So I think this is about equal.
That's true. So going forward with the rest of the game, at what point did you feel
well,
really
I think
comfortable?
if we go back,
sure.
I think the critical moment was here. Rook a8 is already slightly dubious, and after I took, I think knight e4 is just a blunder, because Jeffrey missed simply that after I take king e2. It's very powerful. King will always blockade the e-pawn, and I think this is already much worse for him. And another important detail here, it looks very natural to play rook hf1, but if I play this move hf1, if I play, it looks very natural, right? Bishop g3 he can play. And now if I play rook g1, he has rook f3.
Oh, wow.
And I cannot do anything about it. And same thing happens if I exchange the rooks and I play rook g1, rook f8, rook takes f8.
Still rook f3.
Rook g1, rook f3 still. And he's up a pawn. So that's why I had to start out with rook cf1.
Rook cf1, which looks a bit unnatural, yes, but you have to be aware of
there is a very important
nuances.
Detail there. If we go back, if now he takes on g3 is a blunder, I play rook hg1, rook f1, very important in between rook g3 check.
Ah, very nice.
And then I can take the rook.
And then you're
this
just
was
up
an
a
important
piece.
detail, because otherwise he will be able to get a rook on f3 if I didn't have this idea.
That's true. If king take f1,
and then
black gets initiative with check.
So
and
my whole idea was, to prevent him from entering on the f file. Then I think I played correctly the rest of the game. So bishop f4 is important. Bishop on e5 is very powerful, and I can never push my d-pawn. So that's why I want to exchange the bishops. If he goes bishop d4, it looks kind of natural, but I think up to bishop c7, I'm just winning. Then I just start pushing the d-pawn.
Yeah, the lingering d-pawn is
the main
very
problem for black is he
white.
can never go to bishop endgame in this. He can never enter a bishop endgame because he will be losing because of the d-pawn, and also the a7 pawn being on a dark square.
And this was a very big theme throughout the round today. I don't know if you were watching some of the other games, but we had a lot of games with bishops of the same color, with pawns being fixed on bad squares and long-term potential weaknesses.
So you can go forward the next few moves, I think. So he played e3.
Yeah, this e3 move looked a bit peculiar.
I wasn't so sure. Probably it's not the best move, but on the other hand, I think, I think it's probably not that good e3, but maybe black has some other ideas. But it was very difficult to find a move, actually, because my last move, a4, was quite important to prevent all kinds of counterplay involving b5, because black wants to play b5, toss the pawn, and then we take on d5, so that prevents us. So now I think we enter just a winning endgame. Bishop e3, he takes, bishop g3, king d3. And then I had about 15 minutes here. I spent like 12 minutes here, but at least I think I find the right plan, because I have so many options. I was thinking to play rook f6 and put the rook on c6, but I couldn't see a clear way to win, you know? So that's why I spent my time and I say, okay, I'm going to play bishop rook f3, because now I'm threatening bishop f4, and the reason he played rook e7, it looks very natural to play king g7 here. But the problem, he runs into bishop f4, and he doesn't have rook f8 idea any longer because of bishop h6 check.
Ah, that's a nice tactic.
It's actually very important, because once I eliminate the bishop, I knew that rook endgame is just lost, because d5 pawn is very strong.
And h4 is just so weak in so many lines.
I'm basically playing up a pawn here, technically. So he played rook e7. He played, rook. If he plays rook f7, there was another alternative. I just play king e4, rook e7, king f5, rook g4. Rook f7,
king g4,
rook g7, and then I play bishop g5 here.
Very nice.
It's complete domination. Then there's no counterplay, and I will just. I think I was just planning to play rook e3 and rook e7, just trade the rooks.
Absolutely, and
in a winning endgame.
I have to admire your endgame technique. We played once at Chicago Open a few years ago, and you got like a very small advantage, and you play very nicely to kind of build up small advantages. So it seems like you play well.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think I played correctly the rest of the game. So we can just quickly. There are a couple of little details. Rook e1, so I take. So I repeated the position because I was in time trouble.
Gain some time.
But
why
then
not?
I think the final detail was he's just not in time to take the a pawn. d5 pawn is just too quick. King f4. Now I want to play king f5 and king f7. The final move was king f5. Very important because now I want to play rook h7, and that prevents king e7 because of rook e4 check. And if he plays rook f1, I just simply go king e5, king d6. So I'm up a pawn. And just
very nice. Yeah, very instructive game. I'm sure to show some of your students.
Yes, yeah. I will
nice
definitely show this game to my students. Yeah, I'm finally happy to play a good game against Grunfeld because it was very difficult opening to get anything. And I somehow managed today to get something that I feel comfortable with.
That's right. And you can't ask for a much better start. 2 wins so far.
Yes.
Do you know who you play tomorrow?
I'm not sure, actually.
No, okay. I don't know either, actually. We'll get to that very soon.
Yeah.
How do you feel going forward through the rest of the tournament?
I feel good. It's a good start. I had also a good start at the U.S. Championship. Started with 2 out of 2, but somehow midpoint I ran out of energy and just started to play badly. So I hope to play better. And,
absolutely.
Have a better finish and midpoint of the tournament. I'm definitely very happy with the start because I need a good tournament after the disappointing U.S. Championship. So.
Exactly. Well, we won't keep you any longer. Go get some rest, and good luck for the rest of the tournament.
Thank you.
So moving on, we still have the Dragon Abrahamian game underway. The position hasn't changed much. Let's go back and see what happened over the last few moves. We can see they reached time control. With Kamil having just under half hour, Tatev has just under 20 minutes. We could expect this game to go on for much longer. I will reiterate what I was talking about earlier, with White's main plan being to walk the king around to a4 and somehow invade with eventual king c6. But sometimes plans like this, it's easier said than done. Let's go back and see what White has been up to. A lot of dancing around, and that's what we'll see in sometimes these kind of long grinding positions. Is you just want to make a bunch of moves, try and get some time from the increment, and try and put your opponent under pressure. Try and get some consistently new positions where your opponent has to think. And even if Kamil Dragon isn't objectively winning, I think one of the main strategies is try and get Tatev into time trouble again, given that they're already in sudden death time control, and somehow provoke a blunder. Let's just go forward. I'm not going to give too much commentary on these moves. It just seems like some dancing around. I mean, White is always maybe debating whether or not to play bishop d3. But this is the current position after bishop b1. And I have a feeling that White might be hesitant to play king c3, which would allow kind of the very annoying king e5. And we have to keep in mind that Black's king can't get into the game, or White doesn't want Black's king to get into the game too early. So we're going to keep an eye on this. But we should go to the current standings in Group A, where we have a number of games going on. And I would like to welcome back Katerina Nemcova. Katerina, what do you see so far?
So we see that Var actually and Vasiv, they are the only one here leading with 2 out of 2. Excellent start. Unfortunately, Alexander Indich has 0 out of 2. But you know, this is a very long tournament. You can start with 2 zeros and then win the tournament. I know this happened during, for example, Moscow Open. There was a player who started with 2 zeros and won the tournament. So 2 games doesn't mean anything in such a long tournament.
That's very true. It's all about kind of regrouping, taking it one game at a time. But with that, let's go on to pairings for tomorrow for Group A. I'm expecting a lot of exciting matchups.
So we have Sam Savian against Benjamin Bock, Daniel Friedman against Jaro Jerebuk, Alexander Indich, Peter Prohaska, Jeffrey Zhong against Vasiv Durabaidi. That's going to be a very interesting match. And Rinat Jumanbayev against Var Akobian.
And we will have to keep our eyes on both Vasif Darabaili and Varujan Akobian, who are off to very quick starts with 2 out of 2. And they are both playing Black tomorrow against strong players, so we'll see how those games go. Let's go on to the current standings in Group B, where a lot of games are finished. We currently only have one game pending, that game that we were just looking at between Kamil Dragon and Tatev Abrahamian. We can see in this group that there are no perfect scores, but if Kamil wins this game, he will be the only 2 out of 2 in Group B.
So what is the pairings for tomorrow? Let's see. So we have Tatev Abrahamian against Dinara Saduakasova. So the 2 female players are going to fight it off tomorrow. Then we have Josh Friedel against Kamil Dragun, Robert Aghasarian against Sergei Matsenko, Vladimir Belos against Alejandro Ramirez, and JJ Alimarandi against Andrei Stukopin. What is your key match? What do you think, Eric?
I'm excited to see the ladies play. I mean, I know they're both very fighting players, and if Tatev can hold on and draw this game, I'm sure she'll be very relieved and hopefully have some momentum going forward into tomorrow. But we're going to leave this game going and end it here. So if you guys want to follow the games, you can replay all of the games on uschesschamps.com. We will be back here at 3:30 Central Time tomorrow. The games start at 1 p.m. Central Time. And I look forward to another exciting day of chess.
Yes, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, guys.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.